Okay, okay, testing, testing. Here we are. We are live on YouTube. Check us out at Zagichi Hamelech. Zagichi Hamelech is the YouTube channel, and you can check us out on mnglobal.org, where we're trying to bring Moshiach. As we start up this broadcast, we are joined with Master Sean Lee, Chinese boy, which made his way to the United States, and very talented fellow indeed. But we're here for his wisdom, and we're here for his knowledge of making the world a better place and using Chinese medicine to acupuncture the issues in the world. All right. just there's so much information. I don't even know how to explain it to the layman. So that's just the words that come out of my mouth. But there's obviously a lot more. But before we continue, I just need to do one favor to the people and share this video on the Chrome on the MN Global page, because we promised the people on our Facebook page that we're going to give them the live stream, but at the end we're going to do it on YouTube. So just bear with us as I go and copy the live stream, copy link address, and just paste it to our friends on Facebook, so that they should know, they should be able to join us for this live stream. But in any case, Sean, go ahead, introduce yourself. Let the people know who you are and what's going on.
Yeah, sure. My name's Sean, and I was raised as a Christian when I was about 8 years old. The reason I became a Christian, so to speak, is because they did a skit at my church in which they showed this guy who was given chances to, accept Christ. Accepting Christ is a phrase in the Christian community that you have accepted, with your heart, Christ is the Savior, Lord, or whatever. So I raised my hand because I didn't want to go to hell. They're like, who does not want to go to hell here? You can raise your hand. So raised my hand, and about a week later, I went through the Christian version of the mikvah. And there I was, I became, I guess, through that you're pretty much a Christian. So throughout the years, I've studied and also been acquainted with other religions, other faiths, practices, cultures, and things like that. For one, in China, most people are secular, pretty secular, unless you go into the mountains where people practice, various forms of Buddhism. Or, they're Christians, they're also Jewish people in China, but for the most part, people are pretty secular in China. Eventually, I guess my journey took me to Chabad, the Jewish world, and in which I learned a lot, including from Rabbi Yosef EDERY himself. I guess we're here in short. Long story short, I'm here to, what this is about is what we call the Jerusalem trials, in which we, I think at the heart of this is to try to get people to understand each other, try to get people to understand each other's language. For example, if I say the color red, some people could be thinking about fire, some people could be thinking about roses, some people could be thinking about red peppers, so in terms of language, one of the things that really separated people was the language of religion itself. And one of the things that we talk about is the trial, according to the Christian tradition, that has prosecuted and sentenced this man named Jesus, Yeshua, to death. There are different speculations about whether he even existed as a person in history. He could have been like another one of those mythological characters that people made up. But there are also a lot of people who kind of agree that it's probably loosely or somewhat based on a real person named Yeshua who roamed around during that time. Or, Yeshua could be a symbol that people made up in an attempt to, to formulate, I don't want to use the word propaganda, but formulate, for informational purposes, in their fight against the Roman Empire. So there's a lot of different theories of what's going on, and we try to keep an open mind. And this trial, this theatrical mock trial, is supposed to allow people to come together and talk and debate and also learn about each other's vocabularies. For example, the word Sanhedrin is the word that the Christians used to describe the group of people that prosecuted Jesus. And in a traditional Sanhedrin, as we know, traditionally they need about at least two witnesses to prosecute somebody being convicted of a capital punishment worthy of crime. Like, for example, blasphemy, or, there's a lot of, like, capital, crimes befitting of capital punishment. But the Jews have taken pride, the Orthodox Jews have taken pride, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's very hard to prosecute a person, basically. It's very hard to prosecute a capital punishment. Usually the person is let go completely because there's not enough witnesses, or the witnesses weren't there at the scene, or, for example, in Jesus' case, we have talked about how since Jesus was a mamza, he is a bastard child, a fatherless person. The Torah also instructs us to give extra leniency to a person like Jesus. So we likely would not, prosecute someone like Jesus to the full extent as if he was not a mamzer. So there's certain issues that comes out, and I by no means, I don't call myself an absolute expert. However, in the Christian community, I believe there's a lot of vocabularies and language issues that's not fully, represented here. Like, for example, if we're going to talk about the word hell, Gehinnom, the Jewish sense is a very different, picture than the very commonly interpreted Christian sense, which is eternal burning fire. You die and you basically. But the Jewish sense is more like a cleansing ritual. It's more. I call it almost like a life review in these near-death accounts that people have.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to.
Basically, there's misunderstandings that we want to help with.
Okay, so for those who are joining us right now, let me just recap what we're talking about. We're talking about the Sanhedrin, which is Jewish sages, 70 rabbis, which probably is going to be established in the near future in Israel. The fact being that many Jews are coming back to their religion and going back to conservative Judaism. Many Jewish people are sick and tired of the fallacies of the world as we see them today, and I'm sure many Christians and believers are also people of faith are also sick and tired of globalism, and we see in all around the world people turning towards the right, towards faith, towards God. And even though these times are the darkest times, but there are also times of inspiration, and there are times of light. There are times where the thirst for spirituality is very, very high. Today, Sean and I are going to introduce this concept. Obviously, we are part of the MN Global community at mnglobal.org, Messiah News Global, and we work around the clock to bring world peace, and we have many ways of doing so. We have our articles and hundreds of videos that we put out, and we have our t-shirts and caps and mugs and things that you can buy in order to support our team. Of course, we are a non-profit organization in the sense that we don't work for profit. All of our members are volunteers, and we work from donations like you, and because we really want the world to be a peaceful place. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about the Sanhedrin and why it's important that we should even address this case. And I'm looking through Facebook, and Sean has been telling me this for quite a while, and it seems to be par and parcel of the Christian faith that the actual Sanhedrin, the esteemed Sanhedrin, did not the full Sanhedrin did not take upon themselves the responsibility to judge Jesus, and rather they gave them to a mob rule, or a group of people that already decided earlier on what they want to do with him. So Jesus was condemned to death through the Roman government, in the fashion that the Romans would kill in those days, which was crucifixion, which is well documented in historical tradition. The Jewish people obviously have no historical tradition of crucifying anyone. It's not a Jewish thing. So it's obvious that the Romans were involved. The question is, if Jesus was a Jewish person, why wasn't he put through the process, the Jewish process? And a lot of things come to mind, and in order to understand the story of Jesus, we have to get involved into the nitty-gritty details, and look at it with today's technology and today's psychology, and be able to address his life and the circumstances that led up to his death, and then we can look at why he wasn't judged by the rabbis like a Jew should be, and why was he just given to the Romans for to be handled. So we're going to look at a couple aspects of Jesus, as we said earlier, and we're going to look at his childhood, and then we're going to go on to his adulthood, and then we're going to see how involved he really was with the Jewish community, because at the end of the day, we do know that he was trying to start off his own swing, So, Sean, let me ask you like this: what is Christian? What is the Christian? But the New Testament. What does the New Testament say about Jesus' childhood, his parents, and his childhood?
Well, I have to say that if you're talking about the Canaanized, or the New Testament that people put together, there's not really a lot of writings about Jesus' childhood. There's mentioning, in fact, there's some contradictions. There's apparent contradictions in the books itself regarding his birthplace. For example, I think Luke or John, one book will say that he was born in Nazareth. One book will say that he was born in Bethlehem instead. And I guess one of the explanations is that the Messiah, the Moshiach, was prophesied to be, basically following the footsteps of King David, who was born in Bethlehem. So whether Bethlehem means something that's, like a humble place, or it actually means a physical place of Bethlehem, there's only like one or two. There's limited books in the New Testament that says Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and there's another book that says he was born in Nazareth. That's why they call him the Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus of Bethlehem. So there seems to be some discrepancies regarding little details such as his birthplace, and then you see that when he was 12, or like at some age in his childhood, they mentioned that he, his parents took him to town, and he basically stayed in town and didn't follow his parents back. And then Jesus' answer was something like, I belong in the house of my father, not with you guys, or something. But after that, I think from he was 12 to all the way till he was like 30 or something. They call it the. They don't call it the lost years. They call it something, but basically
the Dark
there's
Ages,
not
yeah,
really
very,
anything
very
recorded.
Yeah, it wasn't recorded well.
Yeah, there's not anything recorded in the New Testament. Then you can look in the other, esoteric or other Christian writings, like the Book of Thomas, or other books that does kind of maybe talk about it a little bit, and also his childhood. There's this famous story, about Jesus made 12 doves and sent them away, and while he's making things, this neighborhood kid came over to kick mud in his face or something, and he turned them to stone. And then when he got a little bit older, the people in the village told him to, turn them back into humans from stones, because he got mad at them. And but then the Christians themselves say that those books are not reliable. We're not sure if they're real, or some people just say they're downright they're just made up. So there's not a lot of things written. There's virtually almost nothing written about Jesus' childhood in the New Testament, and anything that's written outside of the New Testament is is disputed among the Christian communities.
I see.
And
I see.
scholars.
So let's look at. So if so, then we turn to the Talmud and we turn to the Jewish scriptures. The Jewish scriptures do speak about Jesus, and I think it would be interesting for the Christians to know that the Talmud does speak about Jesus, and I think that there was actually a few scenarios in history where the Jewish people had to kind of censor their own books because the local authorities didn't like what the Talmud said about Jesus.
The local Roman authorities?
Maybe
local,
during the Spanish Inquisition, it's possible.
Okay.
And later on, maybe in Russia, I'm talking about like 300 years ago, when the czars were Christian. So there was times in Jewish history that censorship was placed on the Talmud because of certain things that the Talmud spoke about Jesus. But today, a lot of things are coming back, and a lot of things are being revealed, and there's a lot of traditions that we know about Jesus. And according to what the Jewish people know, Jesus grew up in a Jewish house. It seems like his father wasn't around when he was born, and he was born a bastard, and I guess his father disowned him, or it was known that he was a bastard in the Jewish community, and that's a very low level, low profile in Judaism. Like, if you're a bastard, it's not. And he came to the rabbis and he kind of said to them, why are there so many laws on a bastard if he never did anything? It's not like you're punishing me for something I never did. Why am I being punished for being a bastard if it has nothing to do with me? It has to do with my parents. And that was kind of Jesus's main question. And it's a question that many Gentiles can also ask, because many Gentiles see the Jewish people and they see them as the chosen people, and they see them as the children of God, and then they say, why is it my fault that I wasn't born into the Jewish people? My soul didn't come down into a Jewish family. So it's very, what psychologically comes to become true is that Jesus' story is very relatable to non-Jews. And that's why eventually I think he actually was able to catch a very great following in the non-Jewish community. I mean, we have to understand the nitty-gritty and the psychology of all this, the emotional, feelings that Jesus' experience brings forth. And then moving on, we know that for one reason or the other, no father figure was ready to take responsibility and say that Jesus is my son. So Jesus grew up without a father figure, besides God, of course, that he had to guess. He had to kind of guess his way through that. So Jesus grew up without a father figure, which, as we know in today's statistics, would give him a 30 times more likelihood to end up in crime or dead because of mistakes that he will do and misjudgments because of not having a fatherly education.
Okay, guidance.
The guidance that we all get from our fathers, especially for boys. It's very important. So that's the second thing that puts Jesus into this wishy-washy place. So he's mad at the rabbis. He's a very straightforward, pure soul. He's mad at the rabbis because he's being treated like a bastard, because even though he didn't do anything wrong. And then he's also less likely of being successful in the Jewish community because he has no father figure. And it says that he kept going back to whenever he would come to Jerusalem, he would go to the mikveh to immerse himself in the water. And the reason he kept on doing that is because he would hang out with non-Jews and he would hang out with other people. And when you come back to Jerusalem, you have to purify yourself and go to mikveh before you go into the temple. This is not something that most of the Jews would do. Most of the Jews would keep themselves holy. But Jesus was always busy going out and talking to non-Jews and coming back, and talking to non-Jews and coming back. So he had to keep on purifying himself before entering the temple. And obviously that tradition goes into Christianity and becomes the way the way Christians are baptized. Obviously that carries into that. Anyway, moving on. Um, we see that Jesus was able to. In the Talmud, it says that Jesus was able to fly. He used the Shem HaMafarish, God's name, which was uttered once a year by the high priest on Yom Kippur, and it was ordered in order to invoke mercy from God, a very general concept, to invoke mercy from God for all mankind and for the entire human race. And it is the Shem HaMafarish, which means the explicit name of God, is like kind of the binary code of a computer, but instead it's the binary code of the entire universe. So Jesus goes into the Holy of Holies. He goes into the temple, and the high priest utters the name, and Jesus writes it down, cuts his foot open, and stuffs the scroll into his foot. So when they check everyone, when they leave, the security or whatever of the temple, he's able to leave with the name in his foot. And then every time he had in mind the holy name, he was able to do different kinds of magic, like fly or whatever. And then he's basically saying, here, look, I can do miracles. And people that, again, this comes into play, the non-Jews that saw a man flying around and saying, I am Messiah, I am the Redeemer, come follow me. So they saw a Jewish guy doing miracles, and it could be that they were intrigued and they said, wow, this is cool. But what they did not know is that he's using God's name in vain. He's using God's name without permission, and he entered the temple on condition that he would abide by the laws of the house, and instead he is using the name for his own purposes. And this name is a very powerful name, and as we discussed earlier, many rabbis and sages which were righteous in their day, they made sure not to use this name even when they wanted to do great things in the world, because it's such a delicate thing and it really changes the code of the world. The rules of the world are that we have to be in a world of free choice, and God is the one who makes miracles to save his children. And when we take our nimble minds and we decide a conclusion, and we're going to use God's name to invoke a change in the world, it can really mess with the way God wants this world to run, and it's truly, using God's name in vain. So this was a very, very serious thing that Jesus did in the eyes of the Jewish people. Again, the fact that he, as you started off, Sean, our discussion, the fact that he is an orphan, he's pretty much an orphan, whether his father died or not, or whether he was just grown up without a father, so he's in this category of an orphan, and the Bible says that we should give mercy to the orphan. And therefore, I would assume that if the Sanhedrin would look at the case today and say this child is using God's name in vain, he's doing impure acts, he's hanging out with the Gentiles too much, or whatever the standards of those days holiness, because today in exile, the Jewish people, it's very hard for them to practice the laws of holiness. And many of the laws only apply when all the Jewish people are in Israel and when the temple is built. However, in those days, those laws were very, very important. And Jesus was probably breaking those laws as well by going out so many times and speaking to the Gentiles. However, all that considered, if we look at the fact that he was in the category of an orphan, then I can imagine that the Sanhedrin would have given a lenient sentence, and they would not conclude to put him to death. Another thing I want to point out is that he used to hang out with some of the Tanoim. The Tanoim are the highest caliber rabbis that wrote the Talmud, and he hung out with them. They were like this. They are the rabbis who wrote the Talmud. And at a certain point, one of the rabbis made a gesture as such, and he meant that Jesus should come over to him, and he would teach him more. But Jesus thought that he's telling him to go away, and Jesus left and he thought that the rabbis gave up on him, and he kind of started his own thing after that. And maybe the rabbis should have invested a little more time in bringing this orphan, or this fatherless child under their wing. Um, Jesus had a point, and this is something that he carried. And he said, "I am the Son of God," and this is something that every orphan can say. I am a child of God, and we are all children of God. And I think that the Christian world kind of took this concept quite literally, and said, "Okay, he is actually the Son of God." But I think that in a simpler context, we are all the children of God. We are all created in the image of God, and I think that the reason this discussing this issue is very important is because whatever we discuss down here makes an impact in the higher worlds. According to Kabbalah, what we discuss down here in this world makes an impact on the way they see things in the higher worlds. So therefore, I think it's very important that we do discuss this, and I do think that it will have an impact physically on the minds and hearts of those who listen and take part in this, but also spiritually in the higher worlds. But again, there's so much to look at this. Sean, I want you to fill in. Let me know what you think, what your thoughts are as you listen to what I'm saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, I wrote down some of the points that you talked about, and also some clarifications that may be needed at some point. Like, for example, you talked about, like, I don't know, like, there's I'm just looking at my notes right here. Just a quick question. When you said the Son of God, in Hebrew that would be Ben Hashem, right? Or Ben something. Like,
Son of God, Son of God,
Son of God.
The truth is, in Hebrew, we wouldn't actually say it like that.
Okay.
We would say Banim atem la Hashem Elekechem. There's a phrase in Psalms. Banim atem la Hashem Elekechem. Children you are to the Lord your God.
Children you are to the Lord God.
Sons you are to the Lord your God. In other words, God loves us as much as a father would love his children. In other words.
Right. And that's apparently the word that Jesus used to describe himself, or what would be the likely phrase or word that Jesus used to describe himself when in the context in which he said that he's the Son of God?
I'm not sure. I wasn't there, but and also the Talmud kind of speaks about him in a defensive manner. I think because I think the stories of Jesus were already becoming popular, and the Talmud kind of took a defensive measure and to clarify a couple things, just put them out there so people should know. So it was just kind of putting out the information that the Jewish people should be aware of, and we should be able to answer if people ask questions. There's a famous verse. I mean, we don't know which verses he would have used, but we could guess based on the fact that he probably studied the 5 books of Moses, and he probably studied Psalms, because it was after King David's time. So he probably was well versed in the scriptures, and I can imagine that he may have used the word B'Tselem Elokim Bara Es Adam, which means in the image of God, God created man.
Created Adam.
Adam, yeah, the man. So in the image of God, God created man, and the Kabbalah goes into that. The secrets of the Torah go into these things, and Hasidic philosophy is rich with understanding all of these things. And I would recommend anyone who's interested in these things to learn Hasidic philosophy, especially as it was brought down by the Chabad rabbis, especially the book, the Tanya. There's lessons in English in English on the Tanya, which is available. The Tanya is available in every language in the world, actually, even in Braille. So that's a very good place for people to start if they want to go into the esoteric and into the scholarly parts of the Bible.
Chinese medicine parts of the Bible.
Yeah, kind of the second layer. which really is the mystical element of the Bible, which really gives you the flavor, gives you the real, not just the hand emotions, but also the intent and the deeper understanding of everything. Um, I want to continue talking about Jesus' life. I want you to tell me about the way you see the amount of commitment. I mean, you can continue with the notes, but I also I want you to discuss what you told me earlier, that you feel that Jesus was like a a lawyer, a bailout lawyer. What's it called? A bankruptcy lawyer.
Bankruptcy lawyer.
So can you
Right, yeah.
elaborate? Could you elaborate on why you would compare Jesus to a bankruptcy lawyer? I mean, I know that you've experienced Judaism. You've analyzed Judaism and you've analyzed Christianity. Why would you say that Jesus' way of dealing with things is like a bankruptcy lawyer? Go ahead, John.
Well, I would say more accurately, a lot of Christians' way of dealing with sin is like dealing with a bankruptcy lawyer. In my experience, at least, and I've lived in the north, west, south, east parts of the United States, as well as a little bit of, not too much, limited acquaintances with, I guess, Christianity, not really in China, but mostly in the United States, is that there's the very predominant belief and practice that you're not supposed to do anything to reach your salvation. Salvation is something that comes to you outside of you. For example, Buddhism will be looked down upon because they see it as something that you do yourself. You meditate, you do good deeds and things like that. And a lot of Christians, if not technically all Christians, the fundamental belief that would say behind Christianity is that you don't have to do anything but to believe. The only thing you need to do is believe, and everything's taken care of. You don't have to do anything. It's kind of an interesting concept because it's kind of like a bankruptcy lawyer because in terms of Judaism and Buddhism, you're talking about karma, the good deeds and bad deeds or whatever you do, it accumulates. Like, for example, you keep stealing things and, eventually all the evils of the world come back to you. And then that's why you're experiencing, calamity and things like that. But in Christianity, the idea is that as long as you believe in Jesus, whatever the word believe in Jesus, the phrase believe in Jesus means, you transcend all of that. So you don't have to do anything. That's basically the way that they go about it. Some churches teach that, you still got to follow the Ten Commandments, you still got to do certain, abide by certain laws and everything. So it's a little bit confusing. But I think the biggest difference between Judaism and Christianity is that, they kind of, the way Christians watching this can, maybe, word it in their own way or even correct me. But I think chances are they're going to come up with something that's similar, which is that you give everything to Jesus and you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is believe. In fact, to a point where a lot of times when people profess to reach enlightenment, salvation, or nirvana, or whatever, or go to heaven by way of their deeds, those people are looked down, or the ways of those people are kind of looked down upon, and that, or they're ridiculed to. Okay, maybe I shouldn't use the word ridicule, but like looked down upon to a point that they're not relying on Jesus. Like you got this, I call Jesus the bankruptcy lawyer. He's your advocate, between the people and God and everything.
Okay, so you're saying, from what you're saying, I think that it's very important and it's very good. I mean, obviously, what we need to understand is that even if there are fallacies in Christianity, there is a reason why it's there, and there's a reason why the people that took upon themselves Christianity saw much success. And we have to remember where they were coming from. Before Christianity, they were worshipping idols. They were worshipping pieces of stone and images and,
Roman gods.
The Roman gods, the god of Zeus and Greek gods. And So they took all that crap basically and threw it down the toilet, and instead solidified their faith into a Jewish Messiah. And
Right. Yeah.
as we spoke about many times, the culture war was won by the Jewish people, even though the Romans burnt the temple down to the ground. Culturally, the Romans lost because all their idols and literally their entire identity is just a rubble hash of history. And right now, the entire world is learning the Bible, looking for the Jewish Messiah. Now, as a Jew, I will say that we believe that the Christians, still need a little bit more assistance in their path, in their journey to God. But they are definitely much closer to the real thing now that they are allowing themselves to open the Old Testament and read the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the 12 tribes, and the stories of Israel. And we do see that the Christian and Jewish community are very, very close in the United States. The support of Israel is extremely strong and extremely powerful, and it's not just because of Zionist propaganda. It's coming from a real, true place. It's not. I mean, it's coming from a spiritual place. It's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of compassion. As the Christians say, love thy enemy, which is fine, because it's okay if you hate the Jews. That actually is okay. That's actually 100% fine, because you're always going. I mean, even a poor person hates the rich person. He doesn't really hate him. I mean, hate might be the wrong word, but
adversarial relationship with another
yeah,
person.
you see a person with more wealth than you just cringe a little bit. You wish you were as successful as them. So I can imagine that the Jewish people being a light unto the nations and holding the Torah so dear and being and going through all the suffering in the world and never being the aggressor is something that other nations envy from a moral perspective, which is okay, which is fine, and that's why the Christians, I think, finding this love and peaceful attitude with Jesus comes in handy when it comes to the relationship with the Jewish people. However, as you pointed out, the bankruptcy attitude is a very big issue. It's something that needs to be addressed, because we cannot have a world where people are relying on their bankruptcy lawyer, or they're using it as
it's the idea of that all sins are forgiven. It's Jesus, the forgiver of sins. And according to them, that's one of the reasons that the rabbis had a problem with him, because he was forgiving sins as if he was Hashem, as if he was God himself, forgiving sins. That's why people said that that's how Christians describe the blasphemy that Jesus committed, is that he forgave sins. In that case, it's like,
I mean, well, there's if you want to talk about that, I mean, Judaism addresses this, and even on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, the holiest days of the year, we address God in two different ways, and we say im kebanim, im ka'avadim, and it means if as children, if as slaves, and then we continue and we say im kebanim, rachamenu karachem aval banim. If you see us as your children, then have mercy upon us, as a father has mercy to his children. And im ka'avadim, and then we ask a different prayer as slaves. Please, give us compassion in a different way. But the point is that there is both of these aspects when we serve God. We have to serve God in both of these. Either or is not good. Relying on a bankruptcy scam in order to be an income for someone is obviously disrespectful to society and to the economy. Imagine a person builds his entire company, out of smoke and hot air, and he's building it and building it and building it, and it's all built on a few tax scams and a few bankruptcy scams, and he's taking loans and he's doing millions of dollars of laundering, and he's all doing it just in order to do a bankruptcy at the end. That would be ethically wrong. You know, it's like a child that ruins his entire bedroom. He throws all his toys around, and he's relying on the fact that his father and mother love him, and they're not gonna throw him out of the house, or they're not even gonna make him clean up. They're gonna ask someone to clean up.
It could be interpreted as shirking away of responsibility.
Absolutely.
Um,
Well, which is fine because the Christians are relatively to Judaism a new. They're like a child learning the ways of the Father, and as in Judaism we know that there's a bar mitzvah, which is the moment when the child takes responsibility. And Sean, we spoke about this, and I think this is something that you kind of mentioned, that with the Sanhedrin trials, when the Sanhedrin, we're just kind of introducing the idea, and we're kind of going through the points that we think are important. But obviously, our level of we're just simple people here speaking. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more depth and accuracy in the trials of the Sanhedrin, but Christians can be looked at as young children that are just learning about their Father, uh, the Creator of heaven and earth. And at this stage, maybe it's true that God will forgive them for their sins, like the bankruptcy lawyer. But eventually, the 7 laws of Noah have to come into play. Every Gentile in the world needs to know that the Jewish people have a message of the 7 laws of Noah that we're publicizing, which is respect God, do not curse God, and respect His name. Do not kill, do not steal. Respect the family life and the family values. Establish
well, I
courts of
think
justice and respect the animal life.
I think
Yeah,
yeah, I think being a father. I think another point is that being a fatherless child is a result of a father who has mostly, unless he's died in war or something like that. It's a result of a father who has shirked his own responsibilities of rearing the child. And again, without evidence, historical, scriptural evidence, I cannot say that's what happened to Jesus. But at the same time, I think those with fatherly figures in their lives can perhaps take on the responsibility of guiding the people without such male guidance in the formative years of their lives.
absolutely.
Is there like a
Absolutely.
part in the Torah that kind of suggests that? Because there's a part,
Yes.
in Isaiah that kind of says, to judge the fatherless. That's a repeated theme. So when we say judge the fatherless, are we, is it in fact, claiming responsibility for the father people to provide judgment to the fatherless people, as if they're in a
The
way
Jewish
their
community,
children?
in the Bible, in the Old Testament, you can see it many, many times. Lager la yosem v'la almana, to the stranger, to the orphan, and to the widow. We must have extra compassion. Must lend a helping hand. We must take them under the fold. And we see this happen with Putin. Vladimir Putin, when he was a child, his parents were not healthy when it comes to growing up Vladimir Putin, little Vlad, and he used to go to the Jewish neighbors, and the Jewish neighbors used to serve him food, and they used to give him food, and he remembers the Jewish matzah ball soup, and the Jewish hamantashen and the latkes, and he knew all the Jewish holidays, because he knew, and he used to eat the food, and the Jewish family, their neighbors, they used to run away from his abusive parents, they cared for him, and many, many years later, he becomes the most important person in Russia. And of course, his gratitude to the Jewish people was not forgotten. And he, of course, with the fall of communism, made sure that religious freedom for the Jewish people and many others should be guaranteed in Russia. So this is just an example of how powerful a good deed can go and how it can impact the entire world. I can imagine that this Jewish family that fed Vladimir Putin in Russia under communist rule had no idea how big of an impact their small deed would, that small deed would have. And this is exactly what Judaism teaches. This is exactly what the philosophy of Judaism. And we go with what the Bible tells us, and what the Bible says is just it's the blueprint of the world. It's the way God wants the world to work, and the reward and the wisdom is brilliant. It's just brilliance shining. Whether if you want to look at it in a spiritual way or in a physical way, it's just radiant of a healthy lifestyle. And of course, when the child is young, we don't ask him to do chores in the house. We don't ask him to fold the folded laundry. We don't ask a child to carry a dozen eggs from the supermarket. But eventually, when he's older, he starts to become more and more responsible in the house, and he starts to become more and more of an adult. And he actually instead of becoming a burden on his parents, he becomes a helping hand. And hopefully this is what we want the Christian community to understand, that of course God will forgive you for your sins, and of course there's always a place for forgiveness. But just to cash in on that kindness is to be disrespectful to our Father in heaven. Our Father in heaven wants us to commit to the 7 laws of Noah, and there's 7 categories of the laws of Noah, as Dr. Trappler said, which each of those laws opens up to many, many other laws, which it's just a different way of entering the Bible. It's just a different pathway of entering the Old Testament. So in the 7 laws of Noah is included the everything that the Jewish people follow today, pretty much. All right, Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's good. That's a great point. That's some great information there. So I guess we kind of talked about this the other day, that one of the initiatives of the Jerusalem trials is to judge the fatherless. And where does that begin? Well, one of the most prominent historical figures that the Jewish people have regarded as someone who is born without a father, technically speaking, is Jesus. This Jesus of Nazareth, the Christian figurehead, basically. How do we judge him? So when we judge him, and we mentioned that he, according to the Christian scriptures, he was not judged with the actual Sanhedrin. He was in fact judged with a knockoff version of Sanhedrin, basically, so to speak. If he was judged with an actual Sanhedrin, do you think what are the likelihood of him actually being prosecuted and convicted for a capital offense?
I don't think if the actual Sanhedrin would have judged him, I don't think he would have been executed. He would not be killed. And we know that the Sanhedrin, it says that a Sanhedrin that would kill a child, a Sanhedrin that would kill a person once in 70 years would be considered a bloody Sanhedrin. That means they would be like, oh my God, you guys couldn't come up with a reason why not to kill that person? In other words, it was a scorn and a disrespect, because Judaism believes in creating a world, creating a dwelling place for God and for God's spirituality in this world. Creating a dwelling place for God in this world. We are not. We are of the opinion that it is our job to live for God, not to die for God. So of course, when presented with idolatry or idol worship, or of course when it's presented in a situation of, are you going to go against God, or are you going to, then of course then we go with God, and we're ready to self-sacrifice, and we're ready to die for God. But that's not the point. The point is that we should serve God in this world. So therefore, the Sanhedrin would say there's lack of evidence. There's the witnesses are contradictory. They would come up with a reason to say that like a lawyer would do in our day, to make sure that this person gets another chance to serve God, because it's all about serving God in this world.
So there would be advocacy built in within the Sanhedrin itself. It sounds like, in the Western, judicial system, we have the plaintiff, the defendant, we have the criminal defense lawyers representing the defendant. So in the Sanhedrin, would the 70 rabbis be would they take on some of the functions of a criminal defense lawyer of today, back then?
Yes, yes. Of course, every single one of the rabbis has to give his own independent opinion. They would start with the lower. They wouldn't want that. They wouldn't want the Sanhedrin to kind of copy everyone, whatever the other one said. So they would start with the lowest level rabbi, and they would ask him what his opinion is first, so that he wouldn't know what the chief of the Sanhedrin was going to say. So he would have to muster up his own opinion, and he would have to muster up his own thoughts of what he thought the right decision would be. So the lowest level of the Sanhedrin would go first, and he would say, "My opinion is so and so and so and so and so and so for these and these reasons." And this is, of course, after they grilled the witnesses, and they went through all the evidence, and they did all that. The Sanhedrin would sit in a semicircle around, so that everyone is equal. And I think that Congress and many other places in the world take their seating from the way the Sanhedrin sat. I'm just putting that out there. So the Sanhedrin would sit in a semicircle, and then they would each voice their opinion. And there's a very special process of how this would take place. And there would have to be a majority on top of a majority on top of a majority, on multiple layers, just like we have today in we have different levels of court systems and different levels of hierarchy within the justice system itself. There would have to be multiple trials, and every single one of those trials have to be considered guilty, and then he gets to the highest level, and they also consider him guilty. And that would be very, very, very rare. It's just the way the Jewish system was built. It was built in such a merciful way, in such a compassionate way, that it would never usually happen that someone would actually get sentenced to death. And I'm sure that if he would be processed properly through the Sanhedrin, he would have gotten a lesser sentence, and the Sanhedrin today would have can give him a lesser sentence.
Like community service or something.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean it's especially because he is born a mamzer, a bastard, and the category of an orphan, so he would automatically have a level of leniency towards the way he is judged. He would be judged with a little bit more mercy, knowing the fact that he was never given any guidance. So he would be adopted to a family, depending on how old he would be. I mean, in his life, when he would start to start doing things against the Jewish law. But at a certain, he would be, probably community service, maybe clean the temple. I don't know. I'm not sure. Skin the animals after their sacrifice. I don't even know. But the point is, he would be given something positive to do, and he would be given guidance and direction.
So it would have been pled down, that's kind of like today, the Western world as well, or presumably Eastern world too, where it's pled down from like a felony to misdemeanor to like a infraction, violation, and so forth. But what about the? That's the thanks for the answer. I like to bring up the topic of false witnesses, because that's another thing that in the Christian narrative had talked about, how they had hired false witnesses against Jesus at the time, and somehow those false witnesses were believed, or they were used against him, which eventually led to his, I guess, presumably conviction. So what are some steps that the Sanhedrin has in terms of like maybe preventing false witnesses or addressing false witnesses? What is the system it has in place for regarding witnesses? We know the 2 witnesses requirement for a lot of convictions, for a lot of prosecutions. But what is the actual system like? Is it really that faulty? Is it really that easy to get false witnesses against somebody, as the Christian narrative has suggested?
Well, in Judaism we call them Edim Zemimim, conspiratory witnesses. And they're witnesses
Okay.
who conspire together in order to ruin someone else's life. In Judaism, to be caught as an Eid Zaimim is one of the most derogatory statures in Judaism. It's a very derogatory situation to be in. If you are busted being a false witness in Judaism, you are punished severely in many levels. But however, unfortunately, there's only so much the Sanhedrin would be able to do in order to. At the end of the day, they are the judges of society, and if society is corrupt to a level where they are planning their story and they're concocting it together. There's only so much the Sanhedrin can do to get in the way of such a thing. There's only so much that we know that police does in order to get in the way of crime, and there's only so much the justice system can do in order to prevent crime. Same thing is with the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin are not necessarily a body which is responsible for the ethical and moral standard of the day. That would be more the prophets in the day. That would be more the influencers in that day. The messengers of the leader of the generation, and that would be dependent on how well versed that generation is in the study of the Bible. So that kind of stuff would be more.
You mentioned
that would be more dependent on the situation, but there's the process of the Edom Zemimim would be strict. In any case, there is to bust an Edom Zemimim. But again, you have to remember that the law is very dry. The law is dry, and there's no spirituality involved in the law. When the Sanhedrin look at a case, they look at the physical characteristics of the case. They cannot get spiritual in middle. They can't, they say, okay, you stole $1 from him, you owe him $1, It's just very, very clear cut. So there's not a lot of, so if two people conspire together to say, yeah, we saw it and this and that, and they planned it out earlier and they did a really good job, and they're lying, and there's no way that the judges can bust them, then the judges really won't have a way to do anything about it. So it really depends on the level, the integrity of society at the time. I don't think it's something that the Sanhedrin can really do too much about.
So why? So in that case, why only 2 witnesses though? Is it because it's unrealistic to expect more witnesses?
One witness would be too little. Let's put it that way. And I'm sure that in other parts of the world, one witness might be enough. And you might imagine to yourself a very, very important situation, a very, very important scenario in a certain person's life happens. Chances that there's going to be a lot of people there is not necessarily very high. So if you say 3 witnesses, you're already cutting down probably 75% of all cases that are going to ever come up. So we do want to bring justice.
That's the point.
We do want to bring justice to everyone. So therefore, we say not 1 witness, because 1 witness would be too little, because you can just go with your friend and say, okay, let's make some money, let's do it this way, that way. But 2 witnesses. So now go. We're trying to make it not too hard, not too easy, right? We're trying to bring justice to the world, but we're trying to make sure that there's a level of complexity to it. So there's 2 witnesses, and of course, if any of the 2 witnesses have holes in the story, and they're busted, then they're disqualified, and they will never be able to come to court again, I think. There's also another thing I just want to point out. Like us as Jewish children, we have a game called Edom Zemimim. This is a game we play as children, and basically one kid will be the judge, and another 2 children will come with a bogus story, and they'll try to sell it to the judge, and he has to take each of them aside and try to ask them, what color was his sunglasses? Did he kill him with a knife or with a stick? And try to, and then when he finds an inconsistency, he says, Edom Zemimim, I busted you guys. So that's a Jewish game that we play. I'm just putting it out there. So yeah, I mean, it's it's just the things. There's three things that the world stands on: din, emes, and shalom. Din is judgment and justice. Emes is the truth, and shalom is peace. So din would be what the Sanhedrin would represent. Din would be the justice, and that would be taken from the Bible. Emes is the truth. That would be the secrets of the Bible. And shalom, which is peace, that would be the redemption or the prayer. That would be the prayer of the world, that there should be peace. And why do we say prayer? Because only God can really bring the world together. Because the world is so diverse and fundamentally different that only with a prayer can we truly become humble in front of God and mankind and come together. So the Sanhedrin represent one of the three pillars which the world stands upon. Of course, when we say the world, it also, the small world is the person. Every person has those three elements in him: the justice, the truth, and the peace. So it's all about harmony when we're talking about these topics.
That sounds very. That sounds. There's some Chinese medicine or Chinese esoteric sayings that kind of goes along with that. That makes sense. I do also want to. I'm not sure if this is related though. I do kind of want to touch upon the actual charges that since we're talking about the child Jesus and everything, the actual charges that he was brought upon him, including sorcery. I think we have talked about this, or there's sources online that kind of talked about how sorcery, miracles, and things like that were part of the Torah all along. And I think it was Aish.com that kind of gave a standard for which to judge what is good sorcery, what is bad sorcery. And the good sorcery is one that which has moral and ethical standing. And this is according to Aish.com or Chabad, or like there's no Orthodox place. Like, for example, when Moses used sorcery to throw his stick on the ground and turn to a snake and everything, that was for the greater good. That was to demonstrate the power of a Hashem rather than something that's separate from Hashem, rather than something like a magic trick or something, basically. So, well, first of all, like, what do you have to say about that? Would that be the standard that you would also use to judge, to differentiate the good kind of sorcery and the bad kind of sorcery that the Torah,
that Jesus,
or the sages were talking about?
Okay, well, when it comes to sorcery is, I think the term is used loosely. There's first of all, you have to know sorcery. Right, yeah. Sorcery means the source, tapping into the source, and that's basically, I think, what the word in English probably is referring to, and that's what I could imagine. And source, when you tap into the source, you get a special power. So when you're tapping into the code of a computer, you can use it for things that the computer not necessarily was meant to be used for, or you can, you tapped into the source. So there's two sources that people would use to do magic tricks, as you call them. One is the evil source, and one is the good source, the positive and the negative. The negative would be you're taking the negative energy of the world. You're taking hate and depression and anger and lust and all the evil things, and you're just compiling them, and you're using that energy somehow. You have a book. You might have a book that tells you how to tap into that, step-by-step instructions, or you might have a way to tap into that. And then there is tapping into the positive energy, and that would be tapping into the positive source and then using that as a tool. In both realms,
oh, okay.
In both realms, a magician or a real sorcerer will tell you that you need permission to do what you do. You can't just do sorcery without permission. You need to be on the level. You need to understand what you're doing. You have to be responsible enough to use sorcery. And this is something that even in the most satiric, Hollywood movies, this is a common sense concept that goes throughout. You need to have permission to use these kind of powers, and it's true. It's true in Judaism. It's true in Kabbalah and in Hasidus. It's true. Um, you just need to have permission, and you need to be trained well enough in order to do it, and that's the main point. Did he have permission? Did he not have permission? Now we can take into consideration, being that he's an orphan, and being that he had access to these things without guidance of a father, without guidance. So we're going to put him in the category of a cheresheta v'katan, which is a deaf, a dumb, or a young child, which are the three categories of people that are not responsible for their own actions. A child, the responsibility of his actions goes on his parents. A shoita, which is a crazy person, whatever he does, the responsibility goes on the people that care for him. He does not get judged for things that he does, and he is not responsible for things that he does because he is too stupid to do them properly. The same thing as a child; he's too young to take responsibility for himself. In a certain sense, a husband takes responsibility for his wife as well. Um, and a cherish, which is someone that's deaf, also does not have the responsibility. There's also the level. There's also another category, which is a choyle, which is someone that is sick. Someone that is sick is pater min mitzvahs. He is not required to follow the commandments. A cheresheta v'katan as well are not required to follow the commandments. There are certain commandments that they must follow, but most of the commandments they are not. In any case, they are required to follow the commandments from a different perspective, which is education, chinuch. That means that a child has to be educated in the ways of, even till his bar mitzvah, even though he not necessarily needs to do all the commandments, but because his parents have a commandment of chinuch, which is to educate him in the mitzvahs. So from that perspective, he does have a level of responsibility to educate himself and to listen to the education that his parents are giving him. But it's not the same level of responsibility.
So a dumb person would not have the same kind of responsibility in terms of following mitzvahs and commandments, you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. All right, got that. What about the word in Torah in which it says you shall not use nachash? Understanding that nachash.
Nachash. It says you should not menachesh. Menachesh means to whisper, like a snake, and it's talking about all kinds of spells that and Jewish people, because the Torah knew that the secrets of the spiritual secrets in the positive realm would be kept in an orderly fashion and in a responsible fashion, secret from most of humanity. However, they knew that the nature of the dark side is to throw around its power and to try to entice good people into black magic and into using dark spells in all kinds of ways, because that's the nature of the dark and the evil in the world, which is tohu.
Dark spells as defined by lust, evil, hate.
Yeah, and also I would give you talking to dead people. Whether it's like with a Ouija board is a very simple example. No, it's for a Jew. Right. For a Jew, and I think also for a non-Jew, I'm not sure, but for a Jew, it's definitely usur. We're not allowed to talk to the dead, or there's all kinds of ways to use power of the dead or to create power from the dead, which the Jewish people are forbidden to deal with. It's all because of different reasons, each one for their specific reasons. physically speaking, you're causing a lot of pain to the souls that you're using. You're causing immense pain and suffering to the souls that you're using in order to pull off your power and your tricks.
Oh, you were talking about talking to the dead.
Yeah, yeah. I'm talking. There's a lot of reasons why the Bible will tell us not to use dark magic, but I'm telling you from a humane and moral perspective, one of the main things you should know about is that it causes immense pain and suffering to the spirits and to the souls that you use when you communicate with them and you use their power in the physical world. So that's a moral and ethical reason why not to be involved in this stuff.
Okay.
Besides the fact that it brings bad luck to the person and it can cause them to be killed, literally.
Right. Yeah. So the word nachash would be strictly to be used to be describing negative dark magic. So it's not describing positive.
The snake is a symbol. Nachash in the Bible is talking about lenachesh. Lenachesh means to whisper, so it means don't be from those who whisper the whole time, and you're whispering spells and doing things like that. Don't whisper spells. Don't be one of those. That's number one. Number two, the snake is a symbol of the klippa, of the sitra achra, of the other side, the dark side. You can see it on Pharaoh's headgear. You see Pharaoh has a snake on his head, and that was back in the day when governments were straightforward about what they're all about. Pharaoh.
Don't tread on me, snake.
I mean,
don't
actually,
tread on me, snake.
That's actually a positive. I think there's a lot of ways to look at everything, but The snake symbolizes forever the sin of Adam and Eve, and how the snake was the messenger of evil to push Eve into screwing humanity forever, kind of. So the snake also, let's compare the snake to the scorpion for a moment. The scorpion is ice cold, is literally cold. It's so cold and so heartless. Its venom is cold. Everything about it is cold, and it's all about not feeling the warmth of God. It's all about being so bitter and so cold and so isolated and so down and so everything negative that you're just so dry. You're like as dry as the Sahara Desert, literally, and that's where the scorpions hang out. And that's kind of the symbol of like the darkest, driest, saddest, deadliest klippa, which is like evil spirit. And the snake, however, is different than the scorpion because he does have a little bit of fluid in him. He can go on water. The scorpion can't cross the lake. It can't cross the river. He cannot even touch water. That's how dry he is. So the snake has a little bit of fire in him, but he only has fire just enough in order to fool you. It's almost like this, like going into the club. There's the spirit of like there's some fire, but it's real quickly it becomes clear that it's not a real fire. It's dry ice. It's just another illusion of the dark side. If you want, it's like I don't want to be offensive, but you go into a church and it's all dark and spooky, and there's a couple candles here and there, like the classical churches, and they give you this like this feeling. So you're going into something that's not exactly on the light thing. I mean, there are some candles if you want to find them, but not necessarily is the theme light. You go into a synagogue or you go into a normal place of worship. There's light. There's vibrance. So it's all about energy. I mean, there is something.
Depends what kind of churches you go to, but
that's also true. That's also true. But I mean, it's just about the energy. It's about, so the snake is a symbol of the klippa. It's a symbol of classic. It's like classic Coca-Cola. It's the classic klippa. It's the classic darkness. It's the slithering, slimy,
right?
Trickster, which is getting under your skin, is very hard to catch, very hard to, very evasive, has a little bit of warmth in him, but it's just enough to fool you into the poisonous, venomous, ice-cold bite of depression and all the negative things in the
Gotcha.
world. So, I mean, just to end off, the scorpion is obviously a dangerous species. The snake, not necessarily. And there are even snakes that are kind of friendly. And, some people even have pet snakes. But so there's that gray area that allows for him to mingle with the normal people. It's that gray. It's the main place where we fall. Because the scorpion, everyone knows you stay away from a scorpion. You stay away from a scorpion. You don't deal with a scorpion. But a snake, not necessarily. You see, so that's exactly the thing. There are those things in our life which we're like, maybe yeah, maybe no. Those are the things that make us fall the most, not the things that we know we're never going to touch. People know that they're never going to touch this and this bad thing. It's a terrible habit. It's a terrible, place to go. So they're never going to get involved in it. But then there are the things that are like midway, and those are the most dangerous things. That's the snake. All right, back to you, Sean.
Okay, thanks for answering the questions. But I just wanted to make sure that, like for example, the miracles that say like Moses performed by throwing the staff on the ground, turning into snake and everything, that's not considered nachash because it's not negative energy,
Also,
right?
he you see, this is the thing. God told him to do those things, and God kind of
Right.
did all that. God made sure that it worked. Moses didn't have to say anything. God just told him, next time you see Pharaoh, throw the stick on the floor. Moses didn't know what he was doing. Moses Moses threw the stick on the floor just like you and I would throw it on the floor. There was no magic involved. He wasn't pushing energy out of himself. He wasn't transferring energy. He wasn't playing with the code. God was doing everything for him. When Moses
But
raised
what
his
about parting?
when
What about
Moses
parting
raised
the
his hand,
sea?
when Moses raised his hand and the sea split, that was God doing his thing. That had nothing to do with Moses specifically. Moses had no independent power.
But what about
It's kind
what
of
about
like
say?
it's kind of like God tells you, "Listen, I'm going to use you now for a couple things, and I just need you to stand here, and I need you to go there, I need you to do
Right.
this. Yeah, just pick your hand up. I just need to impress a few people, and you're just going to do the motions for me. I'm just going to do all. It's like a magician calls you up to the stage, and he tells you, "I want you to hold your hand out." And
Yep.
all of a sudden a dove comes
So
out.
he
So
was
you're not the
passive about
magician.
it.
You're not the magician.
Right.
You're just a contestant. You're just a messenger.
So
Moses
he
was
was, yeah. So
not
he was
familiar with
So
any
he was
magic.
passive about it. He was very passive. So what about splitting the seas? Like from what they say that Moses actually used an explicit name to part the seas. So would that be technically using some kind of energy or some kind of? I mean, that's not. We can't say that's nachash because it's not something negative. But they say that he used an explicit name to part the seas. What do you have to say about that?
So we know that. Okay, I know that Moses, for example, he. There are okay. First of all, let's clarify. There's a couple things that have to be clear. Today in 2019, a lot of people that might be listening to us might be saying, "Where's the magic at?" You guys are talking about it like it's happening tomorrow. So let me clarify one thing. In order to keep the balance in the world, God always makes sure that there's an even balance of holiness and spirituality and negativity, so that we should always be able to choose, and that we should get rewarded for choosing the right choice. Because if there's no choice factor, then we don't get the reward, right? If it's not up to us, then we don't get rewarded because it wasn't up to us. So first of all, we have to establish choice, and therefore, when the Jewish people were in Egypt, there was the 49 gates of impurity. There was the 50 gates of impurity. The Jewish people went down 49 gates of impurity, and they they were rescued right before they locked into the 50th gate of impurity. So they were practicing magic, Egyptian magic. They were practicing. They were in the dark side, deep, 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 deep. Idol worship and whatever. And at that time of the world, it was kind of the horizon. It was right after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, had one-on-one conversations and deals with God about their children. The fathers of all people today. So we're talking about a very, very high energy. God was very, very involved in the world. God was communicating directly with people in the world. So there was a lot of high energy. There was a lot of direct contact with God. So there was a lot of information out there about how to actually do sorcery, like we said. You know, so there was a lot of this knowledge out there. Now we're kind of in the dark ages of spirituality. A lot of that knowledge is kind of far and gone. A lot of that, God is kind of hiding himself from this world. The impurity on one hand is rising, but the thirst for spirituality is also rising. So we're kind of in a very special dynamic, special time. So it's a very different
So
time.
what about so what about, for example, in the Middle Ages, in the medieval times, when they talked about the Kabbalists, the Jewish people that made golems and stuff like that? Would that be considered? I'm trying to figure out what the definition of the word nachash. The people who made golems by pronouncing certain Hebrew, permutations.
That would be
and things
called.
like
That would be. That would be. I'll tell you. That would be considered Kabbalistic sages, which were using Kabbalah. We're using the secrets of the Bible. If you're using the Bible as your textbook for doing spirituality, usually there's no issue. If you're using the light side, usually there's no issue. As I told you earlier,
If you're losing the light side,
the light, yeah, the light, the positive. If you're using the positive, there's
as
usually
defined by justice, peace, love, morality, and things like that.
no, 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 no,
And
no,
the
no,
dark
no,
side.
no, 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 no. I'm talking about to give you an example. If you're using the Bible, okay. So we're coming back to the question of what was wrong with what Jesus did, right? That's the question that we're
Yeah, and the word nachash, what exactly that meant.
okay. As I said earlier, there were always people in Judaism that knew stuff and they knew how to do it. But usually it was the leaders of the generation. It was the Davidic dynasty. It was the family of King David that passed it down from generation to generation. Certain special words that, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob told the leaders of the Jewish people throughout the generations. They passed it down. It wasn't for the common folk. It was only for the leader of the generations to know. And it was in order for them to be able to protect the Jewish people. It was kind of the atom bomb, secret, and it was passed down from generation to generation in order to protect the Jewish people, and it was usually protected. And that's what I'm saying. Usually, if a rabbi like the Maharal of Prague, as you mentioned earlier, created the golem, he was doing it to protect the Jewish people, and it's evident in how he did it. He created the golem because many blood libels were happening. So he would take the Christians would throw a dead body, a Christian dead boy, into a Jewish basement, and then later the next day they would call the police and say, "Oh, this Jew just killed a Christian boy in order to make blood, to take his blood to make matzahs, to make Passover bread." And so there were a lot of blood libels at the time. So the Maharal saw the plight of the Jewish people, and he created the golem in order to protect the Jewish people from this exact problem. And that's what the golem did. He used to catch them when they're about to throw the body in. He would grab the Christian guys, grab the people that were doing it, grab the dead body, and throw them all into the police station through the glass window. And then the police would be like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And they would see a dead body, and they would see the two people. They would investigate, and they would realize quickly that these people were trying to do another blood libel. So that was what the golem was built for. And after there was a very big trial, and the king made a decree that they're never going to believe a blood libel again. And at that moment, the Maharal said the golem's job is over. So he put him back into the rooftop of the Altanoi Shul, and he commanded that no one ever go there again. Again, we're playing with the binary of creation. Nobody should ever go into the attic. Hold on, Sean.
Okay.
Nobody should ever go into that attic again. Now, when Hitler occupied Germany, I'm talking to you 1940 something, he sent a few of his SS, and he told them, "I want you guys to go up there to the attic and find out. Maybe you'll find some secrets from the Jewish mysticism. Maybe we could reverse engineer the golem. And about 12 soldiers went up, and they all fell out dead, one after the other. And
what was this called again?
The Altneu Schul, the old new shul in Frankfurt, Germany, I think. The Maharal of Prague's shul.
In Frankfurt?
Yeah.
Oh, I was there last year. I mean, I was in Frankfurt last year.
Yeah. So the Germans were so horrified. They never experienced a true spiritual power, and they thought that this would be another joke. When they saw that 12 of their men fell out. And what I'm talking to, this is recent history. This is World War II. You know, you can go
Right,
if you think you have the balls. You can. I invite anyone to go there up any day of the week. You know, so they took out the bottom stairs to going up because they didn't want anyone else to go up there. They were done. They were done messing with the Maharal. The Maharal is actually a descendant of King David. So yeah, there is reason to be caution of the Maharal's powers. And actually the Lubavitcher Rebbe is a descendant of the Maharal of Prague. So that connects the Lubavitcher Rebbe to King David. Anyway, getting back to what we're saying. The Jewish leaders always had mystic secret powers that they did not tell the Jewish people for their own protection, kind of. But they used it in order to protect the Jewish people throughout history. That's not considered sorcery. Sorcery means going into the graveyards, going into digging up dead bodies, taking a bone and putting it under your tongue and trying to get the dead body to talk through your mouth, or putting a skull under your arm. We're talking about a different set of tools, a different set. Moses and
would you call it? Would you use the word nachash to describe what you just described about King David?
No,
who he passed down.
No.
So what would that word be though?
That would be
a different word.
That would be the kind of stuff that Achia taught the Baal Shem Tov. That would be a deeper level of Judaism.
So what would the word be like for something like that? Is there a word for that? Is there a vocabulary term for that?
Kabbalah.
Okay.
Kabbalah Ma'asit. Ma'asit means there's Kabbalah of thought, Kabbalah Sichlit. Kabbalah Sichlit means Kabbalah of thought, and there's Kabbalah Ma'asit, Kabbalah of action.
Okay. So, like, for example, healing. What about healing? Like healing the sick, the dead, or not the dead, because that's resurrection. But like, let's just talk about healing, like someone who is sick, who is whatever. Would that be nachash?
Again, it depends. Again, as we discussed earlier, if you have the permission. Excuse me. If you know, back in the day, there were prophets. The prophets would receive prophecy, and they would transmit that prophecy according to the prophecy that they would get. So let's say a prophet got a prophecy. You are going to become the king, you know? And he anointed King David, and then later King David became the king. Or this prophet got a prophecy, you know, God wants you to know this and this and that. So there were many prophets. There were many sages. There were many learned people. It was a big, you know, it was a big club. There was a lot of action.
How do you define that permission? It seems to define whether something is nachash or not nachash. Like, for example, if you go out and heal people, and one person says, there's two people that are going out healing people. One person says that he has gotten permission. One person says he hasn't. How do you prove that the person who has permission, and the person who does not have permission does not have permission?
Well, you have to ask them what they're using.
So, what would be something? How do you define something that's used that's not nachash versus something used that is nachash?
Okay, so let me give you an example. There was a Hasidic rabbi many generations ago that he heard that he wasn't feeling well, and he heard that there was a lady that came to town and she used to heal people. And he asked some of his followers to go ask her what does she use to heal, and she pulled out a small parchment, And she said, "I got this from a great rabbi, and it was him." And in the parchment, the only thing that was written in the parchment was the name of the rabbi and his mother's name in Hebrew. In other words, he told this woman, use this rolled up parchment with my name in it as a kameya, as basically, whenever God sees you and he knows that you have that parchment with my name, he'll remember all the good things that I did, and he'll grant you grace, and he'll grant you mercy. And he knows that you're connected to me, so he'll give you a pass. And she used that kameya to heal hundreds and thousands of people in the name of this holy rabbi. Eventually, this rabbi was laughing because it was his, because he wanted her to help him, and she was going to use this positive energy, his own positive energy on him, kind of. So, it's like, let me give you an example. Let me give you a physical example so that you can understand how it spiritually works. You have a classroom. You have a classroom of kids, right? Okay. And one of the kids gets student of the week, and he gets a badge, and he pins it on his shirt, and then he goes down to lunch, and the guy that's giving the kids lunch, he sees that he says, "Oh, you have a student of the week. You're the student of the week?" So the kid says, "Yeah." So he reaches under his desk, and he pulls out a lollipop, and he gives it to the kid, and he says, here's a lollipop. And besides your regular lunch, here's a lollipop for being student of the week. I'm sure your teacher is proud of you. I'm sure your parents are proud of you. I'm going to give you a lollipop as well, right? To encourage good behavior. Now, imagine there's another friend of his and he really, really wants a lollipop. He hates the lunch in school, and he's addicted to sweets, and he's really going to starve to death if he doesn't get that lollipop. So he tells the kid that was student of the week, "Can I borrow your pen? Can I borrow your badge of student of the week? I want to go past the guy and maybe get a lollipop from him." And he says, "Okay, I don't mind. You can use my badge," because he's a nice guy. He's a nice kid. So the same thing here, on a spiritual level, and of course a much more complex level. When you invoke the name of a rabbi, of a righteous man, of a holy person, a person that dedicated his entire life to serving the community, to doing good, basically an atom bomb factory full of positive energy, and you associate yourself with them, God automatically invokes mercy and kindness upon you, just because you're associated with this kind of an energy. So that's why every Jewish prayer starts off, "Praised are you, God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." We right away invoke the names of our forefathers in order to invoke mercy from God. So that is not considered nachesh, because we're doing it publicly, we're doing it proudly, we're doing it in the daylight, we're not doing it in a swindle manner. Nachesh would mean to whisper. It would mean to do it in a sneaky way. It would mean to do it in a way of guilt. You know you're not doing it in the right way.
So basically, it seems like a very key element of nachesh. It's the intention of evil, or the energy of evil.
Absolutely.
The darkness. Okay. So, for example, if someone uses something to heal people, to help people...
I mean, you see, this is the thing. Peace. I don't think that Jesus would be necessarily tried for being a menachesh, because he wasn't I don't think he was using dark powers. I think he was using positive powers, but he was using them without permission, and excessively.
So his positive powers, it would technically not be called nechesh.
No, it would not.
It would be called maybe like, not getting consent.
Yeah, it could be like using God's name in vain,
property.
or stealing the property. As we said earlier, stealing the property of the temple, stealing God's name for personal use. I don't know how to explain that, but yeah, kind of. So it might have gone into a different category, but not necessarily. I don't think he was using negative energy. I don't think so.
So okay, so nachesh is once again it's defined by the use of negative energy,
Yes.
not positive.
Or the
Um,
concoction of negative energy.
concoction of.
The creation of negative energy.
Oh,
Like,
okay, gotcha.
yeah.
You with ill intention. Like for example, you could be healing someone, but you're healing someone so that you can steal money from them after they're healed, or something like that. That would be.
The creation of negative
Uh,
energy, I would say, is you can take an innocent child, God forbid, like Aleister Crowley would write in his book later. You could take an innocent child and rape them and kill them, and you create an energy from that evil deed. So you're creating negative energy.
yeah, that's. I mean, that's pretty evil, but
Yeah, that's pretty
yeah,
evil. Yeah, so that's kind of that's the kind of things we want to keep people away from. You see, that's why
right, yeah.
Christianity needs to get its head straight. You know, we need to distance ourselves from evil deeds, and we need to take responsibility for for you know.
I mean, one way of looking at Christianity is that some Christian will say that because of the love of God, it inspires people to not do evil rather than forcing people not to do evil.
Yeah,
So the end
that's
is
okay,
still,
but eventually you need to have a
yeah,
system. You need to have a system. If you want to, for as I said earlier, the beginning to get into that mindset is good. But eventually, if we want to establish a world for another million years, we need there to be accountability.
right, yeah. And since we have the no-hide laws and everything, and I'm assuming that the way, the no-hide laws are going to be one of the references that this Sanhedrin is going to use to issue judgments,
Absolutely,
debates,
absolutely.
mediation, and things like that. Okay, so it seems like this, I think, raised certain questions, but I think it also answers some questions. We come to conclude that basically the consensus between me and you that Jesus will probably not be charged with nachesh, but he would have been charged with like disrespect for property, misuse of the explicit name. So I have to look at the sources again in which they say that Jesus was charged with sorcery. Maybe it was wrongfully charged. Maybe it was part of the false witnesses that the Christians claim that was present. Or it could be a different word other than sorcery. So, and you said that nachesh is really strictly reserved for negative energy work.
Yes,
Whereas,
I have to hear what I mean. We have to again. We're just kind of we're just like scratching the tip of the iceberg. I don't know. I cannot raise my hand and say that I went through all the information about Jesus in the Talmud. I do know a specific amount, but I didn't turn every single stone over. I'm sure
and that's very fair. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure the Sanhedrin will, and I'm sure they will be able to understand a lot better where every argument came from and why it was made, and perhaps understand exactly what the Edim Zemimim, the false witnesses, were trying to do. Um, but we're just kind of speaking about the topics generally and trying our best. But yeah, I will agree with you that the consensus is that looking back, of course, the Jewish people, as I said earlier, and I wanted to point this out, are terribly disturbed by, and it's very hard for them to talk about Jesus as a friend or as part of the Jewish people because of the amount of blood that was spilled in his name, Jewish blood that was spilled in his name.
Right. Right. Yeah.
If we're talking about the Spanish Inquisition or the Crusades or the Nazis, which claimed that they were Christians, and killed Jews in an inferior manner. The Jewish people were killed in the name of Christianity over and over and over again. And even though today, as I said earlier, the Christians are kind of taking a completely different and much healthier spiritual relationship with the Jewish people, and we're actually finally arriving at some kind of common ground in our service of Hashem. the Jewish people have been battered so badly for the last 2,000 years in exile that some of them are still feeling that the Christians are still, especially with the missionary work, still trying to steal our souls. They couldn't steal our bodies, they couldn't kill our bodies, but now they're trying to steal our
Right, yeah.
souls. They're trying to tell us how and who and what to serve and how to take Jesus into our hearts and all that. So some Jews still feel a little bitter about the kind of quote unquote attack of the Christian on the Jewish soul. I mean, this is just the kind of things. I'm just telling you this from a Jewish perspective, how sometimes the Jewish people feel. So when the Christians come and they want to like say, "Oh, what about Jesus? You killed one of your own." The Jews are like, "What are you talking about? We just had 6 million in the Holocaust. We've been boiled down to a pulp, and you have a few more questions for us,
Right.
So it's kind of a very delicate place, but obviously we have to get over ourselves and try to help everyone regardless. So I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, no, that's completely understood. It's I mean, like every generation, like being an ethnic Chinese person, we still have there's still Chinese people with bad sentiments regarding the certain atrocities that were committed during or allegedly committed during World War II. Does that mean we still have we should have resentment for present day Japanese people? I would say probably not. But is there still bitterness in our culture? I would say yeah. There's still bitterness here and there. Same thing with like Americans when it comes to certain things. So that is something to be kept in the back of our minds. And one of the things I do want to see out of this is that I want to see this help with understanding between the different cultures. I want it to help against anti-Semitism. For example, there are Christians that still think that the Jews killed God or something. Something. However idiotic we might think it is. But to present the facts, as history would, I think a lot more people, like you said, would be more open to it. And especially in the United States, a lot more and more people are turning secular, it seems like, every day. Even here in the Bible Belt in Texas, you'll still hear, you'll still meet, like, Christians who tell you they're not religious, they're, they don't, like, practice this and that, they're spiritual. And I think you meet a lot more people today from my traveling who are open to the stuff that you were saying, both spiritual and secular. And, I have a lot of friends who are atheists. I think, something like this would be able to present to them, historical accounts of what happened 2,000 years ago. A lot of people in the United States they have a very bad taste when it comes to hearing about Christianity. To a lot of Americans, when they think of Christians, they think of people who knock on their doors and force these religion down their throats. And that, again, that's not just the rest of the United States. It's even the Bible Belt here in the Texas. The least place that you would expect something like that.
Another thing. We're kind of trying to tap into God. I mean, I've had my fair share of smart Jews, quote unquote, which thought that they represent God Almighty, and they're going to tell me exactly what God is and who God is and what it's all about. That's the kind of part of the religion that everybody is sick of, whether it's Christians, Jews, or Muslims. Nobody wants another human being to tell them what and who God is. Everyone wants to find God in their own personal way, and it's every person's right to know that at the end of the day, that's the truth. God has a relationship with every single one of his creations, whether it's a small ant, whether it's the mountains, Mount Everest, or whether it's you or me. God has a personalized relationship with every single creation that he created. He is the sole ingredient of the creation, and no psychopath, sociopath, smart teacher or parent can can, narcissistically or boss around the kid and tell him how God wants what, where, when. There's always has to be a place of learning, and of course, a place of introspection and looking into someone's self. A person shouldn't be scared of himself. He should look himself in the mirror and say, I am a creation of God, created in the image of God. God wants me to know Him. God wants me to find Him. Read the Bible a little bit, get inspired. I actually think that it's a very nice custom in the United States and in a lot of places in the world that the hotels have a Bible in the drawer in the hotels. I'm sure you know about that custom. You've been traveling around the world, so
Right, yeah.
so the hotels have a Bible in the drawer, and that's the only thing you can find. And it's a very traditional concept, and it's a very special concept. That's like the home of the world, is like the hotel. It's like the home. It's the settled place. It's the temple. It's the four walls, and in the temple they have the Bible. So I mean, I know a lot of people have very bad vibes with religion sometimes. Like you said, maybe somebody knocked on your door and made you, in the middle of supper and started driving you nuts or whatever it is. But you just, you got to know that they're just people that mean well. They're very unprofessional. They don't train them how to talk to people in the synagogue or in the church. They kind of just send them out on missionary work and kind of sloppy Joe. It's more for the person going out than for the person receiving them. But at the same time, it still doesn't matter because we need to find God in our life, and we can't be lazy about it. I would recommend people read the Old Testament cover to cover, and and decide for themselves what they think and what they decide.
Well, I think they another thing is language. I think a lot of language is corrupted in the English translations of the Torah, and some of the Hebrew words are just hard to translate. I think when you do research on what a word means, you'll find a lot more about what it's supposed to mean rather than how it's translated and everything. And one example is, for example, the part in the Torah that says with tachpilot you shall make milchama, war. In the English translation, it's usually translated as with wise counsel you shall make war. But as you've mentioned before, the word tachpilot means conspiracy or deception, kind of like the Art of War by Sun Tzu. All war is based on deception and stuff. But then, I think everything happens for a reason. Supposedly, the one explanation is that King James of England or something, when he had people translate the Bible, he did not want to put certain references in there that would give people the idea of maybe challenging his political powers. So he supposedly intentionally translated the Bible in certain ways. For example,
that wouldn't give people strategic advantage over his little military.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't want people to take ideas from the Bible and think about maybe treating him as the Pharaoh
revolution
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and it's understandable, but I still.
But it's sad because you lose the translation, and I mean, you brilliantly take a lot of words and you bring them up to me, and I try to explain you them from as many angles as possible. And I think that in itself is a very healthy learning experience, and I do encourage, people to ask their local rabbis if they have words that they think they might not have understood or certain, all right, Sean.
Yeah,
I think that we covered a lot of ground today. What do you think? Do we still?
I think we definitely did. I think this is definitely good information for people to have. Obviously, with the Jerusalem trials that we're talking about, I think people would have a lot more opportunities to look into specific words like these kind of things. To foster understanding, to create questions that weren't even there before. People sometimes don't think to ask certain questions until those questions actually come up. And I'm hoping that something like this would encourage dialogue muchly needed dialogue in the world, because I
Of
think,
course, yeah. We're talking of. I
yeah,
mean, I just want to say like the situation in the world is very shallow. You know, people are meeting each other based on pictures on Instagram. Just to take that as an example, you know, there's only a limit how much you can see with your eye of flesh and blood. You know, uh, you can't see emotion, you can't see hurt, you can't see pain. You know, and also the hookup culture today in general is a very sad culture. It's a very painful culture for the women who go through it because they're very emotional. They wholeheartedly put their faith in one man, and then that man, you know, uses them and dumps them, and the next person to see them can see the pain of the first person, and you know, less and less people are trusting each other. We're becoming sad, we're becoming distant. So truthfully, if we get back to the ways of the Torah, I'm sure we can you know, get back on the path of the king, you know, and build up a better society, better, you know, a better system where humankind humankind, people kind,
you,
mankind
Hugh
can
womankind too. Don't
women
assume their gender.
who
Hugh,
women.
Hugh women and men gender.
Yeah.
I mean kind. Hugh women and men
72
kind.
gender kind um, should will all get along and you know, and prosper. And obviously, there's only two genders.
Yeah, I think in regards to hookup culture, though, I think the hookup culture has always been existing. I think throughout human history. You know,
Yeah,
if
I
you
mean,
look
I
at
think
the
I think
Christian,
it's the basis of.
they just had shorter marriages back then. They
No,
call
this
it
is just this is
marriages.
only this is only a limit how much people in the world can be educated at one present time.
Exactly, and that's why I
I
think
think
we
the
have,
educated people always would get married in an organized fashion, but the rest of the world kind of fell into hookup culture,
yeah,
which is
but
kind.
yeah, I think people
But
deserve to be shallow if they choose to be.
yeah, I mean,
You
I
know,
guess
if
so. I
it's
guess
just
so.
like
That's
not
okay.
everybody. Yeah, and it's the same thing with emotional and intellectual depth. However, if, for example, this video can reach everybody, that'll be great. But I don't think everybody's interested in this, and they shouldn't be. Everybody chooses different things as priorities in their lives. But if we can reach out to certain important decision makers, I think if you were to make decisions for, you know, a group, a community, a country, or an
You know, a
organization or something
society.
like that,
Yeah.
then you kind of have to, you kind of put yourself in a position where you have to be a little bit more deep about things, you know, both emotionally and intellectually.
Yeah, because
You know, and I
when you're
think
in
that's
charge of a
something that,
bigger group, when you move your hand a little bit, you know, it moves a million people's hand. So you have to be a lot more careful what you do.
right? Yeah, there's
So when we're looking at the generalization of humanity, we want to see some order. We don't want to see fatherless children without direction growing up. We want to see people be proud to be fathers and teach their children and give them guidance and, you know, take them under their wing and not give them the Jesus experience, you know, um, which led and leads to. I mean, you see, that's exactly that's the paradox of it all. You see, the paradox is that everyone eventually knows that there are going to be a few children that are not going to have a father to run their life. The question is, can we make it that the majority of the humanity decides that it's a healthy, positive thing to grow a family, so that even if there's an orphan here and an orphan there, we can pick them up and put them and they can be adopted. What do you do when you have an entire society that's busy running around and making kids and just running around and running away from responsibility? What you create is a society that's going to need a bankruptcy lawyer once again. So hopefully our video
if
will,
all else fails, we still have Jesus, right?
yeah, pretty much, huh? So I mean, hopefully we'll be able to turn the tide a little bit. And I mean, even in the Christian community, I think it's ripe. It's time. You know, the internet is out. It's time to share information. It's time to get up and grow spiritually. It's time for the Christian community to take a stand and say, you know what? Give it to us. Give us the Bible.
Yeah.
We want a Mount Sinai experience, and we want the Jewish people to deliver, and we will. If the Christian
Right.
community supports the Jewish people, we will be able to deliver, even in 2019, a trial for Jesus, and we will be able to deliver a Mount Sinai experience for the Gentile community, and that will give guidance to the Gentile community. I think that historically, it's kind of God's kind of telling the world, yo, whenever you need help, spiritual help, go to the Jews. And the world's like, what? The Jews? It's like my older brother? I hate my older brother, you know? And then it's like, now it's like 2,000 years later, you're like, you know what? Maybe I should go talk to my older brother. So hopefully that's hopefully the older brother is still in the mood of, he's been cursed out, and he's been taunted, and he's been spat at. The older brother, I mean, like the first of the monotheistic faiths, monolithic faith. So hopefully the older brother is still in the mood of teaching his younger brothers, and hopefully the younger brothers have realized that they need to listen to their father in heaven, and advance humanity. And only with Hashem's blessing will we be able to truly, reap up the gifts that God has given us in this world.
I think another tradition that the Chinese people have is that when the parents get older, you're supposed to take care of your parents. So if we look at God the Father as the Father, there comes to a point where society is maybe mature enough that we will take care of what was before us, and actually, fulfill the commandment of dominating the natural world and take care of it.
Yeah, be fruitful and multiply and conquer the world. That's the first commandment that God gave Adam, and that's what we should do.
You got a lot of these liberal environmentalists who tries to take care of the earth, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's out of good heart. I think it goes along with our initiative of conquering the world, taking care of the world.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Taking care of the
environment. I know that people love the world. I know that people love the world.
Of course they do, yeah.
And they
It's
will
where the
take
money
care
are
of it.
at.
I mean, you've been to my place here in the Golan Heights in Israel. We have lemon trees and fig trees on the streets, and we have it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful to walk down the streets the urban cities is what these liberals should be worried about. The urban cities where the people are all packed in. That's the problem. The problem is,
I think that's
God
where they
doesn't
got
want
the-
us to
yeah.
be, God wants, you should have a person and then 5 acres of land. A person and 5 acres of land. That's how God wants us to, you need someone to tend the garden. That was Adam's job.
Right.
Adam's job was to tend the garden. So you need a person to tend the garden. So that's the point. We should spread the people out.
Yeah. I think a family, like you said, a person is a reflection of the world. So is a family is a bigger reflection of the world. You got
the family unit.
the Western and Eastern
Right.
hemisphere, the mom and dad, and but like you said, when a father is not present, then there's a missing part in the world. So what do we do? With something like this, trial.
I mean, if you look at it in
it's
general,
theatrical and
you said the father is not present. The father is not present is kind of. I would still. You see,
it's
that's
like
what I
there's
was.
no guidance.
You see,
There's no moral-
God is not revealed in the world. God is the true Father of the world. And in certain places in Kabbalistic works, the Jewish people are considered God's bride, actually.
Right. Yeah. God's wife or something.
Right. So
Right.
so maybe we're like the mother, and we're like, Dad's coming back, and we're kind of trying to keep everyone at bay.
You gotta clean up after everybody's
After all the kids, after everybody's garbage, right?
crap, right?
Yeah, clean all the diapers
Yeah.
of all the nations, and get abused because the mother feels helpless as she's tending for her kids. I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but the point is that God is the Father, and He's not around, and maybe that's like, but we need to remember that, Dad ran away from the house because the kids were way too violent. The kids were not behaving. They were disrespecting Dad. Dad was offended. He got on his Harley and he drove away to go hang out
But
with his friends.
some of the fathers.
So we need to prepare the house. We need to take Dad. Your house is ready. We built you the temple in Israel in Jerusalem. We established a Sanhedrin. We're cutting down on all the evil things in the world. We're cutting down on all the things that make you upset. We're listening to all the instructions you gave us, and now you can come back home. And when Dad comes back home, Mother can take a break.
Nah, I think God's just busy spending time with Mother Nature. That's stuff that we'll understand when we grow up and get the birds and bees talk. But I think when it comes to
By the way, there is an element of like the teacher. He knows that once he comes into the classroom, all the kids are gonna stop whatever they're doing. But he's sitting there with his friend, and they're looking through the window of the class, and he's like, look at that kid in my class, how he's playing with the other kid. Look how he bosses him around." And the teachers are just like enjoying watching the kids playing gangster in second grade. So there's a certain enjoyment that God has when He's not present in the world. When He sees us struggling to do good against all odds, there's a certain pleasure that God takes in that. But what we need to do is say, this is enough, God. You got to come. We need your help here. The world needs you.
I think it's good for the fatherless too, because I think a lot of fatherless kids end up being very independent. They take care of their mothers. They take care of the other kids in the household. They become fathers in themselves in a way. So I think it's fair that when they grow up, it seems like rights are taken away from them, but really it's I think in a way it could be interpreted out of compassion. It's like, hey, look, this kid has been strong for a long time in his life. He had to act like the father in his household because he didn't have a father. He has to do the chores. He has to take care of his mother.
Sean,
he has to do everything. He has to have a job.
That reminds me of what happened to the Jewish people after World War II, is that the Nazis, kind of in an example, they took the tree of life, which is the Jewish people, and they chopped off all the branches and they threw them across the yard. And now, and basically, and spiritually, what they did was they said, "You guys don't need the tree. You guys are all independent. You guys are all physical pieces of." You guys are all independent, and only when you're disconnected from the tree do you actually feel yourself. You feel yourself when you're disconnected. And that's what they did. They tried to disconnect the Jewish people. They said, we're just going to kill all the Jews, the physical body. And they're going to cut the tree, and they're going to throw the branches all over the yard. But you know what they did, Sean? They put themselves back 5,000 years. You know why, Sean? Because now, every single branch that's thrown all over the yard is rooting into the ground,
becoming trees in themselves,
and becoming a new tree. Every single Jew that they threw all over the world, whether physically buried into the ground, becoming part of nature, or whether all the Jews that were dispersed, all that live on to carry their name, they are becoming the exact same thing the Germans wanted to hide, which is the Jews are the people who scream. The Jews are the people who say, God is the one and only king of the world. God is the one and only master of the universe. He is the creator of the world. And that's what now, the Jewish flesh and blood, it used to be that only when we open our mouth and only when we start speaking do you hear about the creator of the world. But the Germans said, we're going to kill the flesh and blood of the Jew. And now what they did was they forced God, the Father, to come down and save the flesh and blood of the Jew, which means that every flesh and blood Jew that's standing in the world is now a standing, walking, talking evidence of the creator. We are now the blood. What I'm trying to say is, it used to be that the holiness of God in the world was only in the Bible, and the Jews would carry that message. But now, God made the Jewish people holy because He saw that they're also endangered. So He gave them a special holiness. And now every single Jew has the power to, like I said, branch out and become his own beacon of light in his surroundings, and basically to do what God was doing and what the Bible was doing. So before, we only had the Bible shining light in the world, and the Jews were kind of carrying it around. The branches were carrying it around. And now every single Jew is becoming an entire new operation, an entire new tree of life that's going to spread God's energy into the world. So there's going to be a lot more light of God in the world, God willing.
So the Jews are like bacterias that they try to use antibiotics on. And not only did it not destroy all of the bacteria developed tolerances and actually defeated the antibiotics, and then now it's more powerful than ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way I looked at it. Yeah.
We can see it also because what the issue, like every time they try to kill the Jewish people, there was always a problem with the way they did it. And in the story of Purim, for example, Haman said there is one nation which is spread out and separate throughout the world. But he just killed himself by saying that, because he said they're one nation. That means they're unified. They're one nation that's spread out throughout the world. He tried to say that they're spread out and useless. But he said there's one nation. So he said they're one, they're unified, right? They're unified under God. So that itself gave God the reason to say, oh, they're one under me. I'm going to save them. Or when Haman tried to use luck in order to kill the Jews, he saw that rationale is not working, because the Jews have a good rational case. They say God's the creator of the world, every man is free. So when they saw they can't win the rational argument, right? They can't win the rational argument because the Jew is right. God is the creator of the universe. So they said, we're going to try luck. And they spun the dice, and they said, oh, this is the day that Moses died, and we're gonna do Purim. We're going to kill all the Jews in Persia on the day that Moses died. But what he did, what Haman, which was trying to kill the Jews, didn't understand is that when you're going to use luck, the Jews are going to win you over. And the reason they're going to win you over is because Jewish people are above luck. They're connected to God himself, which is higher than luck, higher than mazel. So the second he spun the dice, in heaven they said, you landed on the day that Moses died, but you also landed on the day that Moses was born. That was the same day that Moses was born. Moses died, and Moses was born and died on the same day in the calendar.
Is there significance in Kabbalah when it comes to the day that a person dies?
Yes. All of his work is elevated on that day. All of the work that he did his entire life is elevated on that day. And every single year, that all of his work gets an elevation on that day. It's a very special day. Yes.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of depth into that concept. So the luck of the Jewish people, the mazel, is very, very strong. And now the physical flesh and blood of the Jewish people is very, very strong. And we brought down spirituality into the flesh and blood of the Jewish people. Again, it was revealed that the Jewish people are a holy people. And even let me give you an example, Sean. If you have the two teams of the Super Bowl that are going to play against each other, and a few players of the team were kidnapped, right? So one of the teams, even if it's the team that you don't like, you're going to be praying that they should find those players, because they're players. The Jewish people, whether they choose the path of going in the path of God, whether they're going to Gehenna or whether they're going to Gan Eden, whether they're following in God's ways or whether they're George Soros, they have a holiness. They have a special connection to God. And the fact that they are God's children, that in itself, they have rights because of that. It's like they have privileges. They have white privilege because they're God's children. And so does every single person. Every single human being has a privilege that he's created in the image of God. And the Nazis by killing every Jew indiscriminately, they revealed that privilege. The privilege, like we said, of the bankruptcy lawyer. You're just God's child. Of course he's going to forgive you. You're his child. That's that same bankruptcy lawyer attitude. Of course you're God's child. Of course he's going to forgive you. You're his child. So that's just one element of it. At the end of the day, if we want to get the world in order, and we want to build the temple, and we want this world to be a dwelling place for God, if we ever want to see our Father again, if we ever want to see God revealed in this world again, we need to take that extra step and tell God, notify God, we're ready, and the Jewish people are more than happy to help the entire world grow spiritually, physically, and everything they need. Give inspiration, give guidance, whatever is necessary to keep the world in a spiritually fit, state.
To give light, yeah. I think giving light will be a very good way of going about it. Putting into words. Yeah, I think there's other there are other things, but what I was saying before is that maybe in judging the fatherless, one way to interpret it is that these people who are fatherless, they probably had a tough childhood because they had to be the father because they didn't have a father, which means they had to take care of their mothers, they have to do chores, they have to take care of jobs, they have to take care of their siblings and everything. So growing up, we say to them, hey, look, you don't have to do that anymore. We'll give you the guidance, we'll give you the tools, we'll take care of you, and that does also include when necessary, discipline as well. For example, if you break the law in a way that's not beneficial to society and ultimately the guy himself,
Sean, as we're speaking, I think a resolution that we could take right now, and we could also offer our audience, is to recommend that, I know that my friend is very involved in EDERY, which made the rap on our channel, but to recommend to people to be more aware in their community of the weaker links, kind of the children that maybe they're not literally fatherless, but they need a little help.
Spending less time with, yeah.
Yeah. So, but we should be aware of our community. We should try to be involved in some kind of volunteer work to uplift the teenagers in our community and give them direction. Give them guidance. Arrange barbecues and sit downs or whatever, meetings with them, and give them a little something and give them direction that they so desperately need. We should definitely be involved in our communities. And that's something that goes, that's something that should go around the world. We want less orphans, less, cases of.
Absolutely. I think in psychology, the studies that I've done or the studies that I've seen suggest that even when a father chooses to spend more time with the mother in relation to the children, that has a definitive effect on distinct personalities that the children develops when they grow older. What kind of people they're attracted to. There's even their sense of humor. The way they word things, the way they interpret things, has a profound effect from how the father gives affection to the children. But sometimes you have no choice. Some fathers spend more time with the kids than the wife, and some fathers spend more time with the wife than the kids. So I guess the thing is that for the people that grow up in a household in which the fathers spend less time with them compared to the other people in the household, something like this could offer a counterbalance for what's missing in their life, and I think developmental psychologists will say that the father is the socializing parent. They socialize the kids. Something, and one of socialization is giving guidance, giving direction in life, giving purpose, also helping with intelligence, education, wisdom, and things like that. And I've kind of said before is that, in the Western culture, that tend to gravitate towards the female side. You hear more cases of the words like daddy's girl, or daddy's princess, rather than father spending, like you don't hear like daddy's. Okay, it's not. It's more
Daddy's prince.
gravitated towards the right. Yeah, I mean that sounds even weird when you say that, but the reason I say that is because in the Eastern world, in China, it's the opposite. Chinese fathers tend to spend more time with their sons than their daughters, at least from what I've seen. In a divorce case, the kid usually goes with the father rather than the mother. So there are certain things that is opposite in China and the United States, and also certain personalities that are opposite. Like, for example, in the United States, career-wise, it's very physical oriented. Like, that's why capitalism works in the Western world according to this theory, because you're dealing with money, you're dealing with tangible things. Whereas in China, it's more authority. And authority is defined by your interpersonal emotional influence over another person. Like, for example, the Chinese president or a Chinese official could go to a car factory and say, you know what, I want that car, and they'll give it to him. Some people interpret that as corruption. To me, that's just a different language. That's just a different way of looking at things, because it goes a little bit deeper into how, the dynamics of how, I call it the birthright theory, in which these personalities develop based on the, they call it the affections, that the father gives to the, to the wife or the son or the daughter and things like that. And because of that, it reflects in two ways: a person's career and a person's relationships. In a country, it's the same thing. You got the career side and the relationship side, and it all has to do with the way that the father interacts with the kids and everything. And they actually have a name for this. They call it the emotional versus physical personality profile, and it's they use it for family therapy, relationship therapy. Like, for example, Donald Trump will be someone that has spent a lot of time with his father, whereas you look at Bill Clinton, he did not have, well, I mean, Bill Clinton is a little bit, because I don't know.
He spends a lot of time with his rapist.
I guess so. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about his history and everything, but, like, if you really look at, so in a way, Western women, personality-wise, has a lot of similarities with Eastern men. I mean, Western women with Eastern men, and Western men with Eastern women. For example, in the Western world, you ask people, who is the more rational, logical gender? Most people, 9 out of 10 people, like we're asking around here, will probably say the woman. I mean, the woman is more, the men is more rational. Women is irrational. They're all emotional. They're very, creative. Men are very logical, factual based, one by one. But then you go to China, it's the complete opposite. My impression of the genders is that women in China tend to be the more rational, quiet, logical, like reserved gender, whereas the men are the creative and loud and emotional people. You come to the United States, it's the complete night and day difference, the way we perceive these two genders. And I mean, there's a lot of exceptions as well. There are certain places in China that's a matriarchy society, so forth. But even like the way we look at servitude and dominance and servitude, for example, in the Western world, men are the chivalrous gender. You only hear about men holding doors open for women, serving women, men fighting for women, men who are knights in shining armors, fighting for his women's honor. Women are supposed to be treated and pampered well and everything. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad, but you go to China, it's the completely opposite. It's the women that are serving the men, the women that are holding doors open for the men, if they would hold the doors open for them. And the women are the gender that serves the men. The men are the ones that are, and some people would say that Chinese men are, in that regard, pampered, and again, so in a way you're creating an emotional-based gender, which is why you see the currency in China being authority rather than money, like a physical money. It's more like intangible. the way you get power is not through how much money you have or how much skills you have, not necessarily, but the way you gain power is by things like inviting people over for dinner, giving them a cigar, let's eat, hey, let's hang out, and things like that. And I think that's very difficult for a lot of Westerners to understand when it comes to the cultures of China. And too many times I think, we label that as corruption, or we label that as, something that's very bad. When, it can be, but a lot of it's just a different language. It's just a different way of going about things, and all comes down to reflecting the way that the father interacts with his family. And even like in ancient times, comparing the Roman Empire with the Chinese Empire, the Roman Emperor would be markedly different from Chinese emperors in that the Roman Emperor would interact with the rest of the people. He's like a celebrity, whereas the Chinese emperor would only interact with his officials and his immediate subjects. So in a way, the emperor is like the father, and the emperor's senate and his people, his immediate officials are like the wife, and the people are like the children. So the Roman Empire, the emperor would spend markedly more time with the children, so to speak, with the people, whereas the Chinese emperor would spend more time with the wife, with his officials. Like, nobody would ever even know what the emperor looks like. Presumably, they don't know him too much. So,
but what I'm hearing from you is that there's many, many different cultures and many, many, many different attitudes that fathers can give their sons, and whether it's an American way or whether it's a Chinese way or whether it's a Russian way, give me more vodka. I need to give my son. My son is not hard enough. He didn't drink his cup of vodka today. So every culture has a different way but there's a common denominator. There's the father that's there, and then there's the father that's not there.
Exactly, yeah.
So you can eat sushi with your kid, or you can drink vodka with your kid, or you can play baseball with him, or you can play tennis with him, or you can have a baby and a bee if you're in Australia, or you can walk with him to see the Buckingham Palace if you're in England, whatever.
Yeah, right.
So you can, whatever your customs are. But whether it's drinking tea or vodka, or eating a hamantash or gefilte fish, or mukbats if you're in China, whatever your customs are, the question is: are you there? Are you home? Or are you not home? And the main thing is that the father has to be there. That's the biggest threat to our generation. Jordan Peterson made a lot of money off the fact that a lot of the teenagers today have no direction. He kind of basically sold them what their father didn't give them, which is responsibility. And he made millions. He's a millionaire today, maybe even a billionaire because of that. And it's sad. It's good because hopefully the people that studied his work will have the courage to build healthy families. And next round we're gonna have a better society. But the point is, well, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, it's really a matter of I forgot to say that it's really a matter of a chokhmah intelligence, because that's how this psychologist has put it, is that people with fatherly attention, from the time when they're born to about 15 years old, basically the completion of the puberty years, they develop personality traits that reflect a relationship reflects more of a right-brained or chokhmah thinking, such as creativity, things like that. There's certain characteristics that are hard to explain, but there's plenty of literature on the difference between chokhmah and bina and everything. But what they found is that people growing up with emotional personality model, basically bina personality model in terms of relationship, because in a career it kind of flips itself again. So in a relationship, people who grew up with not a lot of fatherly attention, so they develop into this emotional personality trait, they tend to gravitate in a mate with someone who grew up as the opposite household. So basically, in a nutshell, a person with a fatherless household or not a lot of fatherly household, influence household, whatever, tend to gravitate towards someone who has grown up with a good fatherly household. Like, for example, me,
right. Like I could see that with the Democrats and Donald Trump. They kind of hate him, but they love him. They can't get over him. They can't get enough of him.
Right, because he's
a
filling
fatherly image. He's a fatherly image.
Right, and he's filling that part about them that's not, that they're missing.
That discipline that they're missing.
Same thing, vice versa.
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so
and
you see
versa,
that you get you saw the speech, the State of the Union speech. You see the Democrats. They kind of all the women over there. They get up and they start getting up and applauding, and they don't even want to.
Exactly.
They don't even want to, but they're getting up and applauding anyway.
Exactly.
They're kind of doing it by mistake, and they're like, oh, what are we doing? We said we're not going to get up and applause, and they're getting up and applauding anyway, and they're all confused. They kind of what's love Trump's hate? They love Trump. They love Trump. They just can't say it. They can't. They don't understand it, but they love him.
And a lot of relationships are like that. You see this in movies a lot, where two people come together, a male and the female come together, and at first they hate each other because they're very, very different. The guy is all, kind of like Donald Trump, or sometimes it could be opposite. This is what I was saying before, is that a woman could also grow up with a lot of chokhmah, influence. Again, up until she's like about 15
depending on which
or something.
culture they're part of, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, in the United States, it's the opposite too. But I find that in the United States, when it comes to careers, like the Bina side of this country, the Bina personality is more pronounced, is louder. So you don't keep, like, for example, the Chokhmah people, the physical personality males are usually the working class. Whereas working class people, they're very much about the family. They're very everything. But the people that go far into careers are the people who focus on facts, numbers, logic and things like that, and they rise up very far in the United States Western culture. Whereas in China, in order to move up the career ladder, you don't focus on the facts, you don't focus on the numbers, you focus on the opposite, which is chokhmah. You focus on building relationships. You focus
on the hustle,
telling jokes. Yeah, exactly. You focus on doing the things that Donald Trump is doing. You focus on
making connections,
telling, making connections, like building emotions and things like that. Whereas so does that mean there are no men in China that's very logical based, very Bina based? No, there is, but you just don't hear about them a lot. Like your human brain, your left brain has the language center, the Veritas areas. Taking care of language and everything. The right brain does not have a language area, so technically it's a silent brain. Some people would say. What I was saying is that I guess what was I saying?
We were speaking about the differences in the way the father-son relationship works. I mean, but I think
that's right.
Sean, I think that what we could all agree on is that a father must be there. A father should be there.
Some kind of male figure, yeah. It could be a government too. To some people,
I actually spoke to someone that came from an abusive house, but he said that even in an abusive situation, he disagrees with what most governments do. In an abusive situation, they take the kids away from the parents. He says that even in a abusive situation, taking the kids away from the parents is a very bad thing and a traumatic thing to the kids, regardless of if the situation is abusive. What needs to be done is the parents need to be trained in how to deal with the kids properly. Right. Not that you take the kids away from the parents, but I mean, and I agreed with him in a certain way, and I really understood where he's coming from. So I kind of had one little place where I disagreed with him, kind of where like the abuse is out of proportions, out of healthy proportions. It's not like he gets mad at them and he gives them a smack. It's like he gets mad at them and he almost kills them. So like that kind of thing, like I would have to say, maybe you really, I mean at least temporarily take the kids away. But the general, but what we could agree on, at least here today, is that the father needs to be involved in the kid's life as much as possible, in order for the kid to grow up happy and healthy, and have good direction. Of course,
I absolutely agree.
that takes a lot of learning and discipline and patience on the father's part. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking to the fathers. We're talking to the fathers of tomorrow. It's not necessarily easy to talk to a dumbass, which is usually what your kid is compared to you, and to be patient enough, and to be, and that's where the compassion and the love comes in.
Yeah, well,
That's where you develop the love for
yeah,
your children, because you know that
yeah,
they're not as smart as you, and you know that they're not on your level.
yeah,
So you develop that love, and you develop that passion, which gives you the patience and the time that they need in order to understand you better. And just keep that going, and just hope that your kids,
yeah,
you know, that's, I think that's the lesson that Jesus would want us to take from this
yeah.
little narrative today.
I think one
All
of the
right, Sean,
most
we got to wrap it up.
best.
So give us your
Yeah,
30
you're
second
right.
plug, and
I was gonna say, yeah, one of the most important indicators of a smart person is good fatherly relationship. But I do want to add that I think there is a solution for fatherless kids, and it's through matching them with the right people. Like, for example, a fatherless man could be matched with a very fatherly household woman. In a movie, you might see like a very
absolutely
nerdy guy
including
who's
them
not
into the
interested in
community of healthy people always can
right, yeah,
help.
and sometimes even the father-in-law could be, an acting father for the opposite, sex or whatever. But in the movies, with hot blonde, with the, usually that, she grew up as a daddy's girl or whatever, and then she's interested in this, this nerdy guy who's not interested in relationships or love at all because he's grown up without a father or bad fatherly figure or something. And then at first they hate each other, kind of like, the woman will be like Donald Trump and the man will be like a Democrat. They'll come together. Eventually they'll realize that they both make up a missing half of the other person. Vice versa, a very, football jock guy who's, very outgoing, finds this, quiet little girl who's, not interested, only interested in her career, not interested in people. They come together, they hate each other, like just like Donald Trump and the Democrats, and eventually she clapped for him, and they get married, they have kids or something at the end of the movie. So you see that a lot being played out in movies. So I think there is a solution, and I think matchmaking is a very important thing in today's society. We need to, I think one solution is to match people with the right partners in life.
Absolutely.
I'm not,
Matchmaking
you can
is a
still
very
hook up and
important
everything,
thing. People should be able to, if someone can, back in the day, you would go to someone and tell them, hey, if you find me a good girl and I get married to her, I'll give you $1,000. I'll give you $1,000. That's how important it is for me. And that guy would be like, really? All right, I'll hook you up.
a thousand shekels?
1,000 shekels. So, and he would make it, that's how important it was for people. Until today, in the Jewish community, for example, it's customary to give the equivalent of $1,000 to the matchmaker if the match goes through. And that's also kind of a blessing that the matchmaker will be happy about the match he made, and he gives his blessing, kind of, that because you paid him, and you paid him like a man, you guys will live happily ever after, and the match will stick forever.
Right.
So that's
And
kind of that's kind of the karma element of it all, and whatever the positive energy element of it all, and that's how important it should really be in today's day and age.
There's a story about, the last one, there's a story
go.
about Jesus going to Japan, and he met this girl who was a farmer's daughter. Again, fatherly, that there's that evidence of fatherly, influence in her life. This farmer's daughter that he got married, he settled down with her. He was no longer performing miracles or anything, according to this Japanese legend. And I have other stories about him too, but this one I think was the only one I'm aware of in which Jesus marries someone, having left Mary Magdalene at some point or something. But anyway, so he, it was a happy, marriage. They had 2 kids or something. But again, in terms of judging the fatherless, Jesus is a symbol. Some people say he doesn't even exist. I mean, let's just say he existed, but he's a symbol for the fatherless. How do we judge the fatherless? Let's use him as an example, as a historical figure, as someone who is respected in the Christian community. And again, one of the solutions is to.
It's like, what would God want from what would God want from us in our approach to the fatherless? And when we say fatherless, we mean
right.
And we look at it in that context. All right, Sean, Yechia Melech, it's been real.
All right, yeah, all right.
We'll
We've
continue.
been talking a long time, I know.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I'm sure our audience had a good time. People checked in and out, I'm sure. Yechia Melech, we'll be in touch. And if you guys like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. And we'll see you later.
Blah, blah,
with the
blah.
ultimate and complete redemption. Peace out.
All right, peace out. Shalom Aleichem.
All right, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, that was the great Sean Lee. Thank you for joining us today, and we are ending this live right now.